In the year 2482, space travel had become normal for humans. Colonies were spread across the solar system, from Mercury's lava bases to Neptune's ice platforms. Technology had grown fast, and so had the gap between rich and poor. One of the richest men on Earth was a young man named Dallin Maris. He was the only son of the Maris family who owned TerraCorp, a powerful energy company that controlled solar mining stations. Dallin had everything: money, fame, and invitations to the most expensive parties in the galaxy. People knew his name across all 13 human worlds. But Dallin wanted more than wealth. He wanted attention. And nothing got attention faster than a surprise romance. That's when he met Mira. Mira was not from Earth. She lived on Mars Colony 9, where the air was thin, the work was hard, and people lived in domes with recycled water and strict oxygen rules. Mira was a simple woman, an engineer who fixed old machines and designed new ones from scrap. Her hands were rough from work, but her mind was sharp. She didn't care for luxury. She cared for purpose. They met during a supply conference at Lunar. Dock 7. Dallin was bored, walking past the engineers section when he saw Mira fixing a broken plasma core with just a wrench and a bit of cloth. Most engineers would call for a machine or a team. Mira just got it done. Something about her confidence, her quiet strength, caught Dallin's interest. She didn't ask for his name. She didn't look impressed. She just nodded and said, "It's fixed." "You're welcome." He smiled. For the first time in years, someone wasn't trying to please him. Over the next few months, they spoke more. Messages turned into calls. Calls turned into visits. Soon, Dallin found himself traveling to Mars more than he stayed on Earth. People in his circle started asking questions. "Why her?" they said. "She's a colony worker. You could have anyone." But Dallin ignored them. He said he had found something real. Then came the surprise announcement. Dallin Maris engaged to Mars engineer Mira Solon. The news broke across all channels. Some praised Dallin for looking beyond status. Others mocked him. But the wedding was planned anyway. It was to be held on the Celestara, a giant space cruiser that circled Earth's orbit and hosted royal-style weddings for the wealthy. No expense was spared. Dallin told Mira she could wear anything she wanted. Designers from Earth, Venus, and Europa sent samples. Dresses made of shimmering moon silk, solar thread lace, and anti-gravity veils. They all offered to make her look like a star queen. But Mira refused. "I want to make my own dress," she said simply. "Something that means something to me." Dallin raised an eyebrow. "Your own dress? You mean, like, by hand?" "Yes, with recycled materials from Mars," he laughed. He thought she was joking. But she wasn't. Weeks passed. Mira worked quietly in her small dome. She used old heat shields, layered Martian cloth, and added hand-stitched symbols from her family. It was plain, silver gray, and shaped for movement and comfort. It didn't glow or float. But it was hers. Finally, the wedding day arrived. Hundreds of guests floated aboard the Celestara, dressed in shining robes and glittering suits. Dallin stood in front of the crowd, wearing a custom-made tuxedo woven with actual stardust particles. Cameras from every planet zoomed in on him, broadcasting the event live. As Mira entered the hall, the doors slid open with a soft hum. All eyes turned. She walked in slowly, wearing her handmade dress. It looked different, simple, calm, with symbols on the sleeves and a rough but meaningful texture. Some guests gasped. Others whispered. Dallin looked at her and laughed. He didn't even hide it. "You really wore that?" he said in front of everyone. "It looks like a blanket from the repair bay." The room went silent. Mira paused. Her eyes met his. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just stood tall. One of the guests, an ambassador from Saturn's ring cities, cleared her throat and said, "I think it's unique." But Dallin shook his head. She had the whole galaxy's fashion in front of her. And this is what she picked? Come on, don't pretend it's something it's not. The cameras kept rolling. People around the solar system watched the moment. Live. Some were shocked. Others chuckled. On Mars, engineers paused their work and stared at the screen. Mira looked around the hall. She saw the expensive lights, the rich guests, the floating music drones. And then she turned around. She walked out of the wedding hall without saying another word. Gasps followed her as she left. Dallin stared, confused and annoyed. Is this a joke? He asked. She'll come back, right? But Mira didn't come back. She left the Calistara, took a shuttle, and vanished from sight. For the next 2 days, no one could reach her. Reporters tried, colony officials tried, even Dallin tried. But Mira had disappeared. Across the networks, people began talking about the moment. Some made fun of her. Others started asking, who was this woman who walked away from one of the richest men in the galaxy without saying a word? On Mars, a few people smiled quietly. They knew Mira, and they knew she was not the kind of person who would accept being mocked, not for her work, her roots, or her choices. Dallin, on the other hand, had to deal with angry investors, confused reporters, and endless questions. He told the press, she's just emotional, she'll come back. But deep down, a small worry grew in his chest. What if she didn't? And if she didn't, what would she do next? Because Dallin had forgotten one thing. Humans from Mars don't back down. The news of Mira walking away from the wedding spread fast. Within hours, it became the top story on every communication channel across the solar system. Videos of her walking out in silence were shared millions of times. Some people laughed at the drama. Others stayed quiet, thinking deeply about what they had seen. On Earth, Dallin Mara sat in his private room aboard the Celestara. He stared at the screen, watching replays of the moment over and over. He tried to smile in front of the media. But inside he was angry and confused. This doesn't make sense, he said to his assistant. She should have felt lucky. She had everything. A wedding no one from Mars could dream of. His assistant didn't reply. Even he knew Dallin had made a mistake. Mocking Mira's dress in front of the galaxy was not just rude, it was cruel. People didn't forget things like that. Meanwhile, in the dark silence of space, Mira was nowhere to be found. She had taken a small transport pod from the Celestara and disappeared into the black void. The pod didn't go toward Earth or Mars. It went off-grid, away from common traffic lanes. Even the trackers failed to find it. Rumors started spreading. Some said Mira had gone to an old research station near Jupiter. Others said she was hiding on an asteroid base. A few believed she was building something big. But no one really knew. Back on Mars Colony 9, people watched the news with mixed feelings. Some were proud. That's Mira, said an old worker. She's always been strong. Others worried. What if something happens to her out there? A young technician asked. But Mira's closest friend, Commander Theo, was calm. He knew her better than anyone. Theo had worked beside Mira for years in the colony's underground labs. He had seen her fix broken systems with only wire and dust. He had watched her build life-saving machines using scrap. She's not hiding. Theo told the others. She's thinking. And he was right. Mira was floating inside her small pod, deep in thought. She wasn't running. She was remembering. She thought about her parents who had died during a Mars storm when she was just 12. She thought about her first job cleaning filters in the oxygen plant. She remembered how she had studied at night, alone under the red sky, just to learn how to build and fix machines. She had worked hard every day to help her colony survive. And now, after all that, a rich man had laughed at her because her dress wasn't made of glowing thread. Her hands tightened on the FICA controls. She knew what she had to do. Mira turned her pod toward Saturn. Not the cities or tourist domes, but toward a quiet station called Ed-7. It was once used for testing deep spacesuits. Now it was mostly forgotten. But Mira had been there before. It was where she had built one of her proudest projects, a suit that could survive solar flares in space, radiation. She still had the access codes. As she approached the station, lights flickered on. The old AI welcomed her. "Welcome back, Mira Solon." She smiled for the first time in days. Inside the station, she opened the storage lockers. Tools, materials, energy cells, everything was there. The place smelled like oil and old metal. She took off the silver gray dress and hung it carefully. Then she got to work. For 2 days, Mira designed, tested, and built. She didn't sleep much. Her hands moved fast. She added new layers to her original dress. She inserted nanocircuitry, armor plates, and crystal wiring. The dress slowly turned into something new, not just clothing, but a living machine. It could protect the body, adapt to gravity, and store data. It was no longer just a dress. It was a symbol. Meanwhile, Dallin tried to fix his public image. He gave interviews saying Mira was just taking a break and that the wedding would continue soon. But the people weren't so sure anymore. Why did he laugh at her? Asked a Venus merchant. She walked away with such pride. Said a Neptune engineer. Across colonies, Mira's silence became louder than Dallin's words. Artists painted her image. Children in Martian schools learned about her story. The workers saw her as one of their own. The rich tried to understand, but they couldn't feel what she felt. Then, one morning, a message arrived. It came from Myra. It was short. "I'll be at the altar one final time. If you still want to marry me, be there." The time and location were attached. It was not on the Celestara. It was not on Earth. It was a small neutral moon called Helia, orbiting between Mars and Jupiter. A place with no wealth, no fame, just peace. Dallin was shocked. "She's serious?" He asked. "Yes," his assistant replied. "And this time, the whole system will be watching." Dallin thought long and hard. His advisors warned him. "If you say no, you'll be remembered as the man who mocked a hero." But if he said yes, he had to face what he did. He agreed. A new wedding was set, simple, quiet, but more important than the first. On the day, guests from every world gathered. This time, not to see a rich man show off, but to see what Mira would do. And far across space, Mira stood before a mirror. She wore her new creation. It was powerful, beautiful, and filled with purpose. She didn't need approval. She didn't need praise. She was ready, not to marry someone who didn't respect her, but to show the galaxy that real strength doesn't shine, it stands firm. The moon Helia was quiet. It had no big cities, no flying cars, no giant towers. Just rocky hills, silver dust, and a clear view of the stars. It was the perfect place for a new beginning. A small dome had been built on the flat side of the moon. It was simple, made from glass and metal. Inside, there were a few rows of chairs, a long aisle, and a platform at the front. No music played, no dancing lights. Only calm silence. People from across the solar system gathered, both inside the dome and watching through live streams. Some sat in their homes. Some watched from space stations. Others gathered in small groups in colony towns, waiting for the moment when Mira would appear. Dallin Mara stood at the front of the room, dressed in a clean black suit. It had no stardust threads or golden buttons this time. Just plain cloth. He looked nervous. His eyes moved to the doors again and again. He had not slept much. The guests whispered quietly. Will she really come? Is this a trap? Maybe she changed her mind. Then the doors opened, and everything changed. Mira stepped into the dome. The room fell silent. She walked slowly, each step strong and steady. Her dress was not like anything people had seen before. It looked like armor, but it moved like cloth. The surface shimmered. with soft colors not bright or glowing, but smooth and quiet. The sleeves had tiny lights that blinked like stars. Thin layers of Martian crystal formed a pattern across her chest symbols from her colony. Her boots were made from heat-shield leather, and the fabric was filled with fine wires and micropanels. It was not just a dress. It was a message. Mira was not here to impress. She was here to stand. As she walked down the aisle, the air inside the dome seemed to change. Even Dallin looked surprised. He had expected something different, maybe something soft and beautiful. But what he saw was powerful and unforgettable. Mira stopped in front of him. She looked into his eyes, calm and clear. "I came," she said simply. Dallin opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at her dress, her face, the crowd. He knew everyone was watching. "I didn't understand before," he said slowly. I thought your dress had to look expensive to be special. I thought you were just being stubborn." Mira stayed quiet. Dallin took a deep breath. "Now I see. It wasn't about the dress. It was about respect. And I didn't show you any." She nodded once. "You laughed at something that mattered to me, not just the dress. My time, my work, my pride." "I was wrong," he said. "And I'm sorry." People in the crowd leaned forward, waiting. Would she forgive him? Would the wedding continue? Mira looked around the room. She saw people from Earth, Mars, Venus, and beyond. She saw workers, engineers, scientists, and even a few leaders. They were all here for her, not for her money, not for her fame, for who she was. "I didn't come here to marry you, Dallin," she said gently. "I came here to speak, to show something." Dallin's shoulders dropped slightly. He looked down, ashamed. Mira turned toward the crowd. "This dress is not just made from cloth," she said. "It's made from my life. My past, my knowledge, my mistakes, and my strength. It can survive heat, cold, pressure, and radiation. I built it not to look pretty but to last. Like the people of Mars." She touched the sleeve. Tiny lights danced across the surface. "This is for the workers who build life under red skies. This is for the children who study by solar lamps. This is for the ones who were told they were too plain, too poor, too simple." Mira's voice stayed calm, but her words were strong. Real value is not in how something looks. It's in how it is made, how it serves, how it lasts. The room was quiet. No one moved. Dallin slowly looked up. "So, this is goodbye?" Mira smiled softly. "Yes, but not with hate. I don't hate you. I just learned who I am." She stepped away from him and faced the crowd again. "I will not marry into a life that doesn't see me. I will walk forward alone, proud and unshaken." She walked past the guests and stopped at the door. The sunlight from Helia's sky reflected off her dress like quiet fire. She looked back one last time. "I thank you all for watching, and I hope you remember what you saw today." Then she left. The door closed behind her. Inside, people stayed silent for a long moment. Then someone clapped. Slowly, others joined. The sound grew louder until the whole dome was filled with it. Mira walked across the surface of Helia toward her pod. Reporters tried to stop her, but she waved kindly and kept walking. She didn't need to explain herself anymore. As she lifted off from the moon, a message flashed across space. "Mira Solon has declined the Maris wedding, but she has accepted an invitation from the United Human Frontier to join their High Council for Innovation." On every world, the message spread fast. On Mars, people cheered. On Earth, people paused. In Dallin, he stood alone in the dome, watching the screen as Mira's ship disappeared into space. This time he didn't speak. He just watched. And finally understood. The ship carrying Mira Solon moved smoothly through space, leaving the quiet moon of Helia behind. As the stars passed by her window, she felt no sadness, no anger, only peace. She had walked away from something many people would have chased their whole life. A wedding to one of the richest men in the system. But she didn't regret her choice. She had kept her self-respect. And now, the galaxy had noticed Dot by the time her ship landed on Titan Station, the outer edge base of the United. Human Frontier, her name, had become a symbol. News channels, colony radios, and personal screens all showed her final words from the wedding dome. Some called her the woman who walked away. Others called her the flame of Mars. But all agreed on one thing: Mira had shown true strength. At Titan Station, she was welcomed by Commander Ellen Droz, leader of the High Council for Innovation. The council didn't care about money, fashion, or fame. They cared about minds that could help humanity survive the harshness of space. Mira's work on deep space survival suits, colony energy systems, and Martian oxygen filters had impressed them years ago. But now, after seeing her dress, which was a working model of emergency survival tech, they knew she belonged with them. "Mira," Commander Droz said, shaking her hand, "what you made was more than a dress. It was a breakthrough." It was. Art, science, and engineering in one, Mira smiled. "Thank you. I built it to protect and to speak without words." The other council members nodded. They offered her a place among them, an honored seat at the round table of inventors, thinkers, and builders who shaped humanity's future. But Mira had one request. "I want to return to Mars. I want to build a research center there, one that trains young people from working colonies. A place where anyone with skill and heart can invent, learn, and rise." Commander Droz agreed. "You shall have it. We'll send equipment, funds, and people." And just like that, Mira's new path began. Back on Earth, Dallin Maris watched the news from his family estate. His face was quiet, his eyes tired. For the first time, he didn't want cameras or parties. He didn't go to meetings. He didn't make statements. He just watched. His mistake had changed everything. And now, people didn't look at him the same way. Many called him foolish. Some even called him cruel. The Maris name was still powerful, but its shine had faded. His father, Roland Maris, walked into the room. "You lost something more than a fiancé, son," he said. "You lost the people's respect." Dallin nodded slowly. "I know. You can either hide from it or learn from it." Dallin didn't reply. "Not yet." Meanwhile, Mira returned to Mars Colony 9. She didn't arrive in a luxury cruiser. She came in the same kind of ship she had used all her life, small, strong, and simple. The people of her colony gathered to greet her. Children ran with excitement. Workers clapped. Even the colony governor showed up. "You make us proud, Mira," he said. But Mira didn't come back to celebrate. She came back to build. Within weeks, the Solon Center for Future Builders opened. It was built beside the oxygen towers, using old metal and clear glass. Young engineers, coders, designers, and thinkers came from all over Mars and nearby moons. Some were barely 15. Others were older. All had one thing in common: they were ready to learn, and they didn't come from rich families. Mira taught classes, fixed machines, and helped students create their own inventions. She wore her survival dress often not as a show, but as a teaching tool. She explained every part of it: how each wire worked, how it could hold heat, how it stored air in emergencies. Students took notes with wide eyes. "This isn't just a dress," she told them. "It's a story. And you all have stories waiting to be built." Word of the center spread fast. Soon, scientists from Europa and Venus offered to help. They sent equipment and joined as guest teachers. Even the Saturn Research Union sent a full lab setup. One day, a young girl named Selah came to Mira with a broken solar panel. "No one in my area teaches how to fix these," she said. "But I watched your videos." Mira smiled and showed her how to reconnect the wires and build a battery unit. "You just needed to start," Mira said. "Now build something new." Selah later became one of the youngest engineers to design a self-charging rover for low-light planets. As months passed, Mira's center became more than just a school. It became a voice, a reminder. That talent doesn't belong only to the rich. That strength can come from the dust of Mars, just as easily as from the towers of Earth. But not everyone liked this change. Some elites said Mira was raising false hope. Others felt threatened. They tried to discredit her, saying she had used Dallin Maris to rise. But Mira didn't reply to hate. Her work spoke louder than their words. In one solar broadcast, she simply said, "I walked away from a rich wedding, but I walked into something far greater, a future worth building." And that was enough. Back on Earth, Dallin finally stood before the public. No bright suit, no prepared speech. "I once thought wealth meant power," he said. "But I was wrong. True power is what Mira showed. Quiet strength, unbreakable pride. I lost her trust. But I hope others learn from what she built." It was the first time he spoke with honesty. Some forgave him, some didn't. But everyone could see he had changed, far above the planets. On the edge of deep space, a new station was being planned, a station named Mira 1, designed by her students, approved by the High Council, and supported by colonies from all sides. It would be the first space platform built entirely by people from working-class colonies. And the leader of the project? Mira Solen. She stood before the press one morning, wearing her updated survival dress. It had new layers now, improved by her students. On the front was a patch with her center symbol, a rising star from the red dust of Mars. "I am not special," she said. "I just didn't let others decide my worth." And across the stars, humans listened, they remembered. The story of Mira Solen had spread across the stars. On every human colony, from Mercury's heat domes to the icy cities of Neptune, people now knew her name. It was more than just a story about a wedding. It had become a turning point. In the past, heroes were rich explorers, powerful scientists, or high-ranking officers. But Mira had changed that. She was not born into power. She built her own path with her hands, her mind, and her heart. Now her name was everywhere. In Martian schools, students studied her survival dress to learn about smart design. On asteroid stations, workers printed her speech and pinned it to walls. On Earth, news anchors called her the pride of the people. Artists painted her face beside quotes like, "I walked away, but I walked towards something greater." And even in places where the rich ruled, something was changing. One afternoon, in a Venus sky city, a group of wealthy investors met in a tall glass tower. They were watching the news in silence. A live feed showed Mira teaching a group of students in her center on Mars. She turned a broken dress into a movement. One investor said quietly. Another nodded. "She's becoming more trusted than any government voice. Look at the support. Even the outer belt colonies follow her." "Now," a third man frowned, "that's dangerous. If people stop looking up to the elite, we lose control." But the truth was clear. Mira had sparked something powerful. A public awakening. People were no longer impressed by shiny clothes, golden halls, or family names. They respected those who worked, who helped, who created real things. And Mira's survival dress, once laughed at, was now a symbol of unity and progress. Meanwhile, Mira stayed focused on her work. She didn't celebrate or demand praise. Every morning, she walked into the Solen Center, checked the machines, taught her classes, and listened to her students' ideas. One evening, a young student named Arden showed her a design. "It's a suit made for asteroid mining," he said shyly. "I used your dress model, but I made the boots magnetic and the arms strong enough to lift rock pieces." Mira looked over the sketch. "It's smart, very smart. Add a cooling system and it could save lives." "Really?" Arden's eyes widened. "Yes, and I want you to build it with the team." That night, Arden stayed up working in the lab. The next week, the first working model was tested. It worked better than expected. Soon, asteroid miners requested copies of the suit for their crews. Just like that, a teenager from a poor colony had improved space mining safety across the system all. Because Mira gave him a chance, back on Earth, Dallin Maris had changed too. He no longer appeared at big galas. He started visiting local tech schools and listening to young inventors. He wore normal clothes now, and when reporters asked about Mira, he always said the same thing. She was the teacher I didn't know I needed. His family's company, TerraCorp, had taken a hit after the wedding. People had stopped trusting them. So Dallin decided to try something new. He opened a scholarship fund called the Mira Solin Program, giving full education and equipment support to colony engineers, especially girls and young women. When Mira heard about it, she didn't comment. But she smiled. She knew real change came not from words, but from actions. Months passed. The Solin Center grew larger. A second campus opened on Jupiter's largest moon. A third was planned for Europa. Mira now led a team of over 200 engineers, teachers, and helpers. But she never let go of her roots. She still repaired broken machines by hand. She still ate with her students. She still wore her dress now, improved with layers designed by her own students. One day, a message arrived. It was from a deep space research crew near the edge of the solar system. Our main system failed. Power low, air leaking. We used the Solin survival model to stay alive. The suit saved us. Thank you. Mira read it slowly. Then she turned to her students. This, she said, holding up the message, is why we build. They clapped. But more than that, they felt proud. Their work was saving lives. Across the system, small changes began to appear. Colonies that were once ignored now received more support. Students who had no access to labs now got shipments of tools and materials. People began asking questions like, why does a dress matter more than what it can do? And what if we listened to more voices like Mira's? The powerful started to feel the shift, but it wasn't a protest. It wasn't a fight. It was quiet. It was steady. It was human. The kind of change that cannot be stopped because it grows. From truth, from need, from real hope. On a calm morning, Mira stood outside the dome, looking at the red sky of Mars. A young girl walked up to her. Miss Mira, she asked, will I be able to go to space one day? Mira looked down with a smile. Yes, she said. And not just go, you'll build the ship, program the tools, and teach others how to go farther. The girl grinned. Mira knelt beside her. Never let anyone laugh at your dreams, not even rich people in golden suits. They laugh because they don't understand, but you will show them. Not with loud words, but with quiet, brilliant work. The girl nodded. Like you did. Mira stood. Exactly. That evening, as stars blinked above, Mira walked into her lab. The lights were soft. Her survival dress hung near her desk, shining gently. She looked at it with calm eyes. A dress made of old parts. A dress that once caused laughter. A dress that now stood for everything human beings should be: strong, creative, and proud of who they are, and far across space. Someone was watching. A little girl on a small moon colony, sketching her own design. A boy on a ship, fixing an old tool. A woman in a factory, saving her coins to buy her daughter a toolkit. They were watching Mira. Not as a fashion icon. As a rebel, but as a builder, a human, just like them. Years passed. The name Mira Solin was now written in history books, taught in classrooms, and remembered in homes across the galaxy. What began as a quiet walk away from a wedding had turned into something far greater, a new path for all of humanity. But Mira never chased fame. She stayed busy with her work. The Solin Center for Future Builders had now expanded to 5 colonies. It trained over 10,000 students every year. Some of them went on to design energy systems for cold planets. Others built medical robots for asteroid hospitals. Many started teaching in new colonies that were still growing. And Mira? She still lived in Mars Colony 9. She had received offers to live in luxury domes on Earth or Venus, but she always refused. "My story began here," she said, "and I will not leave the soil that made me strong." Her small home had a simple metal roof, sand filters at the door, and solar panels above. She had added a green plant room on the side, small trees, flowers and vegetables growing inside under warm light. It was her favorite place to think. One quiet morning, Mira received a visitor, a girl named Talia, 16 years old, from Neptune's outer dome. She had flown across space alone, just to meet Myra. "I watched your speech on Helio when I was 10, Talia said. "Since then, I've been learning design and repair. I want to make something great too." Mira welcomed her with a warm smile. "Then come, help us build the future." Talia stayed for a year. She worked hard and learned fast. By the time she left, she had created a small floating rescue drone for collapsed tunnels, something her own colony badly needed. She wasn't the only one. People like Talia came from all over the system. The Solon centers had become places of real change, not just learning. No one cared where you were born. What mattered was what you could build, fix, or imagine. Still, not everyone supported Mira's work. Some large companies and power groups started to feel nervous. They couldn't control Mira. They couldn't buy her name. They couldn't own her dress, her designs, or her voice. And that made them uncomfortable. "She's dangerous," one leader said. "People listen to her more than they listen to us." Another added, "Her centers are changing the balance. The poor are rising too fast." But the people didn't care about those voices anymore. They followed Mira. Then came the invitation that would change everything again. The United Human Council, the highest human group in the galaxy, sent a personal message to Myra. "We request your leadership for the Titan Dome project, the largest human expansion ever attempted beyond Saturn. Your vision, strength, and history are needed." The Titan Dome project was no small task. It involved building a fully independent city on Saturn's largest moon, a place where humans could live, grow food, and build for the next 100 years. It would be the first step toward moving deeper into space. For a while, Mira said nothing. She sat in her green plant room, looking at the small tree she had planted years ago. Its leaves were wide now, strong and healthy. She touched the edge of a leaf and thought of her students, her dress, her home. Then she stood up and gave her answer. "Yes, I will lead the project, but I want no golden office, no special chair. I will live among the workers, teach with the engineers, and design with the builders. If I cannot walk beside them, I have no right to lead them." The council agreed. And so, Mira Solon began a new chapter. She left Mars Colony 9 after saying goodbye to her students, her home, and her green room. She promised to return one day, but first, there was more work to do. At Titan Station, thousands of workers, thinkers, and dreamers gathered to greet her. They clapped as she stepped off the ship, wearing the same dress now updated by her students with new tech and stronger layers. This time, no one laughed at it. They knew what it meant. Myra got to work quickly. She met with every team, reviewed plans, tested machines, and listened to ideas. She treated janitors and engineers with the same respect. She ate in the same cafeteria, slept in the same cabins, and worked late nights just like everyone else. "Build it not just for now," she told them, "but for the generations to come." The Titan Dome began to rise. It was built from new ice glass, powered by internal cores, and protected by solar barriers. Under Mira's lead, the city took shape faster than anyone expected. One day, a reporter asked her, "What keeps you going? You've already done so much. Why keep building?" Mira smiled softly. "I keep building because there are still places where voices are not heard. There are still children with dreams but no tools. There is still work to be done." Back on Earth, Dallin Maris watched the launch of Titan Dome's final core from a small office in a quiet town. He had left the spotlight long ago. Now he worked for a small research group that studied water tech for dry planets. He had no regrets. Mira had become something far greater than he ever imagined. One of his co-workers showed him the latest broadcast. Mira's dome is almost done, she said. She's calling it Horizon 1. Dallin smiled. That sounds just like her. On Titan, as the final walls of the dome were sealed and the power lights came on, Mira stood before a large crowd of workers, engineers, and students. The stars of Saturn's sky lit the clear roof above. She raised her hand. This is not just a city, she said. It is proof. Proof that human strength comes not from wealth, but from work, from vision, from unity. The crowd cheered, and across the solar system, people watched with hope. Mira Solon had once walked away from a wedding. Now, she had walked into history, not as a bride, but as a builder of futures. 10 years after the first lights turned on inside the Titan Dome, the city had grown into a shining example of what humanity could become. There were no kings, no golden towers, and no special chairs for the rich. Every street, every wall, every classroom had been built by people who believed in purpose over pride. At the center of the dome stood a tall tower made of clear metal and reinforced ice glass. At the very top was a museum, not full of treasures, but full of stories. And at the heart of that museum, inside a clean glass case, was Mira Solon's dress. Not just a dress. A symbol. It had been carefully cleaned, repaired, and preserved. Wires, crystals, solar threads, all still in place. A small plaque beside it read, "This dress was worn by Mira Solon when she chose dignity over wealth, truth over silence, and courage over comfort." It reminded the galaxy that what we build with our hands and hearts is more powerful than any crown. Visitors came from every colony to see it. Children pointed at it with wide eyes. "That's the one she wore when she walked away," they whispered. Some people cried softly. Some stood in silence. But all of them remembered. Mira, now older but still strong, lived in a small unit on Titan's West Ring. She refused to live near the council hall, choosing instead a quiet spot near the farming gardens. She still wore simple clothes, still taught classes, still answered messages from students far away. Her voice, once full of fire, had become slower, but no less clear. One evening, while watching the sunset filter through Titan's ice clouds, Mira sat with Talia, who was now a leading designer in deep space drone work. "You built more than machines," Talia said. "You built people," Mira smiled. "I only showed them that they were already builders. They just needed a chance." Talia looked down at a small package she brought. "I made something for you." She opened it carefully. Inside was a new dress, not shiny or loud, but made with fresh designs, flexible metals, and tiny patches stitched with names of students from across the colonies. Mira touched the fabric. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It's not for wearing." Talia replied, "It's for passing on. For the next one." 1 month later, the United Human Council called for Mira again. This time, not for a project or a speech. This time for honor. "We want to name the new academy after you," they said. "It will be placed on Pluto's moon, Karen. A cold place, but full of new life. We want to teach future leaders what you stood for." Mira accepted, but instead of giving a speech at the opening ceremony, she simply walked to the center of the academy and handed the dress from Talia to a young girl named Reen. Only 17 years old, from the dark colony below Neptune, Reen had built heat-safe tunnels for her community, using trash metal and solar mirrors. "You remind me of who I was," Mira said. "Take this. Let it remind you who you can be." Reen cried when she received it. And the cameras recorded every second. But Mira didn't stay for the party. She left quietly and returned to her small home. Years passed again. Mira stopped teaching full-time. Her walks became shorter. Her hair turned white like Saturn's rings. One day, she sat in her plant room, now moved to Titan, surrounded by new leaves and flowers. The air was quiet. The sky outside glowed soft blue through the dome's shield. Mira closed her eyes, and gently, like a star fading at dawn, she passed away in peace. She left no demands, no secret wealth, and no final speech. Only her work and her story. The day Mira Solin passed, the entire system paused. Lights dimmed on Earth. Flags dropped on Mars. Children lit candles in every colony. Her dress, both the original and the one passed on, was placed side by side in a final ceremony. The council declared the day as Mira's. The Vedic build, to teach, to dream. A message was broadcast across all human worlds. It was simple. She never wore gold, but she gave us light. She never shouted, but she was heard. She never ruled, but she led. Mira Solin showed us the future, and we walked into it wearing strength. Far away, on a mining station near Jupiter, a young worker named Isla watched the broadcast. She wiped oil from her hands, looked at her torn uniform, and whispered, "One day, I'll make something that lasts too." In that moment, somewhere in space, a new dream was born. Final scene, in the Titan Dome Museum, where the dress stood behind glass. A small group of children visited with their teacher. One boy raised his hand. Why didn't she wear a fancy wedding dress? The teacher smiled. Because she already wore something better. She wore her truth. The boy nodded slowly, understanding. Another child whispered, "Do you think someone like me could be like her?" The teacher knelt down and said, "Mira believed anyone could, especially someone like you." Outside the museum, stars blinked gently across the black sky, and the dome, built by hands and hope, stood strong because of one woman, one walk, and one dress.